this is one of the things that I don't understand about politicians is they seem to assume that people don't know when they're saying nothing. Right? Like they give these statements that are vacuous, as if everyone's gonna go, oh, okay, now I'm fine. That was, you gave a statement, it meant nothing, and I'm satisfied with nothing. But there was a poll recently in the Wall Street Journal that came out that said even though Trump's agenda is very unpopular, the only thing more unpopular is the Democratic Party. Their lowest level ever at the moment when they should be, like, considering the unpopularity of Trump's agenda, rising.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show how, I think it's two things, honestly. Like, one is people see the Democratic Party and they just see like feckless, nobody with any fight. Even the Republicans, like they can't respect the party as it is today. And then beyond that, I think it's like, what do they stand for? What is their answer, right? At least Trump, I don't think Trump is delivering any sort of answer, but Trump kind of ran on his version of an answer for this decades-long economic decline that's been happening for working people in this country, right? And his answer was, let's shrink the pie, kick the immigrants out. We've spent too much time focusing on immigrants and other people and not enough time in America, right? Like America first. And the Democrats, I don't think, have an answer to that. And it's this, like, even if they did, like, even if, like, I don't know, Chuck Schumer came out and was like, we're gonna get rid of the billionaires, we're gonna stop paying this big donor money. I mean, it's unbelievable to think of. Like, no one would trust him. Like, it has to be new people that go into a party to change what this party is. And I do think that's possible. That's the hopeful side of this. Because we did see Trump basically remake the whole Democratic or the Republican Party pretty much by himself. Right.
And I think there's another thing that I've noticed and written about a fair amount, which is even when the existing Democratic leadership is confrontational with Trump, it's often in weird ways that don't make the moral lines clear. Chuck Schumer had like a video a couple of months ago where he was saying like Trump is soft on Iran. Like that was what he was going. He was saying Trump is soft on Iran.
I know.
And it's like, and he was like going after him for being, and I'm like, what a bizarre criticism of someone who is like doing illegal airstrikes in violation of international law. It's like, yeah, you're fighting Trump, but like it's not really clear what your set of ideas are. Are you like coming at him from the right on foreign policy?
Yeah, I think it honestly comes from this weird, like they don't actually talk to a big swath of voters in the country. And yeah, I'm running in San Francisco, but I grew up in Texas and like I lived in Tennessee for a while. And it's like Chuck Schumer has some idea that saying things like that is going to convince those people in Texas. But it's like doesn't make sense. It doesn't actually line up with what's on the ground. And so I think that's part of it. And I think the other part, as you sort of alluded to, is like the Democrats for so long have just done these kind of bare minimum shows of opposition, right? Like the paddle during the State of the Union address, or like Cory Booker's, big speeches that he does. But then they don't actually fight when it comes to action. But the Republicans often do fight in an act. They use their power, right? So you poll Americans, they like, even if they hate the Republicans on policy, they just see them as effective. And that's a big problem. Like people want an effective government, right? They want a party that when they get into power, will give you a chance. We don't care. It's change. We'll give you a chance, but you have to actually be able to deliver and do something.
Now, we have been in our conversation here criticizing the present leadership of the Democratic Party, and I think it's fair to say that if anyone is known for taking on the Democratic leadership within the party, it is yourself. You ran AOC's campaign against Joe Crowley and became her chief of staff. And that was a campaign to dethrone a feckless, useless, entrenched Democrat who'd been around too long. Justice Democrats is about doing that. And I think if people read Ryan Grimm's book on the Squad, they will find out that even within AOC's own office, at the time that you're there, I don't know if this is fair comment, but you come across as the one most spoiling for a fight with the Democratic leadership, and sometimes getting into some trouble for your willingness to confront other Democrats. And I think I would, and so clearly you have a point of view that is it is important. Yes, unity is important. Yes, at a time of Trump's authoritarian nightmare, it is important to focus on the real enemy that is Trump. But you have long made a point that we have to aggressively confront those in the party who are not doing what they need them to do. And so let me just put to you what the criticism of you would be from it, which is, when they saw you in AOC, why are you taking on other Democrats? Why are you criticizing the party leadership? Get in line, basically. And so tell me why you reject, get in line, we have to fight the right.
I think we're in a crisis in the country, right? I really do think it's been a slow boiling crisis for a while with just, the struggle that most people in this country have had. And it's so obvious to me. It feels like, yes, of course, people are voting for Obama when he pitches big economic change. He didn't necessarily govern that way, but that's what he pitched. Of course, they're voting for Trump when he pitches economic change. And then I go in and two things really, I guess, sort of piss me off. One is there's just no recognition of reality within the party. There's no recognition of what is the larger thing going on here? What do we do? I still remember going to my first chief of staff meeting. They do these weekly chief of staff meetings in Congress, and I thought this was going to be the place we show up and we're going to make our game plan. What do you do about Trump? And it was bizarre. It was like a thing from Office Space. It was the members are all complaining that there's too many staffers in the members' elevators. Really? This is the shit you're going to talk about at this meeting where you have all the chiefs of staff together? And it was just, they don't take this crisis seriously. They don't take our moment in history seriously. They don't take the job seriously. Even if you're just a Democrat who's just in there to do legislation, do the work, do your committee hearings. That's not what most of the people in there do. They spend 8 to 10 hours a day calling donors for money. They take a break. And their whole view is we're just going to keep our heads down, vote the way leadership says, and then, work our way up the ranks. In 40 years, I'll get to be chair of the Veterans Affairs Committee. Is that careership mindset to this? It just
in the last 6 months of my life, as we saw recently with what was the guy who
with Connolly? Yeah, I know. I mean, unfortunate, right? That's the thing is that it's unfortunate that he's in that position. He's in that position. It really drives me crazy because I feel like there's this real problem that needs to be solved, and you've got all these people in this room who've worked their whole lives for what? For this? Just to go in there and what? Just keep your head down, vote with leadership, and not actually try to solve stuff. It's so as someone who really likes to solve problems, it just drove me crazy. Yeah, it really did.
Yeah, tell us a bit about this. It's some great. You are a very satisfying character in Ryan Grimm's book because you're the guy who sort of shows up periodically in the book and goes, "But why are we doing it this way?" I was just rereading the fight over the pay-go rule, where Pelosi is very pro this rule that everything has to pay for itself, and it's a terrible rule that doesn't allow you, that prevents you from doing lots of important changes. Or I'm getting it all wrong, but you there's this scene where you're being told, "Oh, don't worry, the pay-go rule will be waived routinely anyway." And it says Chakrabarti that asks, "Well, then why can't we just get rid of it?" So can you tell us a bit about those kinds of interactions that you had there?
When things happen that make no sense to me, I question it, right? And one thing that I really learned from that whole fight, because that was one of the very early ones. That was the rules package is the first thing you pass when you get into Congress, right? And the folks from the leadership staff would just lie, right? They would just say things. And I remember I had the ear of a senior staffer who had worked in Congress before, who wasn't there anymore, and so he had nothing to lose. And so I just run stuff by him, is this true? No, But that's how they try to get you in line. And most people who are just trying to build a career in Congress and their career in the Democratic Party, of course, just go along with it. But why? I don't understand why we preemptively give up our leverage, right? Why do we the Democrats are controlling the House? Why not pass the rules package that you want to pass, as opposed to like preemptively like doing some consensus with the party that's not even in power. It makes no sense. And that's like the second part, because it's not just, in my opinion, like a big part of what I'm running for and what I think needs to happen is, yes, policy, right? Like we have to actually do these structural reforms, these broken systems that have just been breaking worse and worse for decades. But another part is I just think the Democrats' approach to politics is short-sighted and gonna lose. Is just short-sighted and gonna lose. Like even their approach to how they do campaigns is just you focus on these purple districts and that is shrinking every year. And if you look at the demographic shifts, by 2032, we're in deep trouble if that's your strategy. If you can't figure out a strategy to win beyond your purple districts, we're hosed.
Well, I thought about that when I saw this thing about, Texas is doing this redistricting to rig things in favor of Republicans. And I thought, well, yeah, that's bad. But also, like, there's this presumption like, we can't win. Those districts have been rigged against us. Those are Republican districts. We don't really compete in those. And my thinking is, okay, yeah, they've done redistricting, but like this idea that you have the Republican districts, we just don't fight those. I mean, I wrote an article a couple of years, I think back in 2018, and there was a district in Georgia, congressional district, where the Democrats, it had been fairly competitive. The last Democratic run had gotten within like 6 points, but they deemed it a red district. So they ran a candidate. They didn't even bother to run a candidate. Some guy signed up who nobody could even find. The local newspaper couldn't even find who this guy was. And they basically surrendered. There were no pictures of him even. And they surrendered because the Democratic Party had decided, well, we're not contesting that seat, even though they'd gotten within 6 points, which suggests to me like, if you don't think you can close that gap, you don't have any confidence that you can move people in any way.
Well, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like the less you compete in those districts, the worse you lose them, and so you stop competing in those districts. And I think it's part of this general mindset in the Democratic Party of just really like short-termism. It's like a lot of, you just pay attention to this next election is really numbers based, like, these are like the 5 targeted districts we found where if we do this exact right messaging, we might win. But then you look at the Republican side and they do long-term plans. They've had long-term plans to take over the Supreme Court. I mean, Trump was out campaigning in the Bronx. He wasn't going to win the Bronx, but he knew that it's good for him to start building some sort of support for the long run there. And on the Democratic side, at New Consensus, we've been working on this thing called the Mission for America, right? Which is really like a long-term strategy. It's like the next time we have a Democratic administration, here's like our Project 2025 of how do you do a massive rebuilding project and build high-wage industries in America. And we had so much trouble getting people within the Democratic Party to care about something like that just because it was like one election cycle away. That's been my experience. So even watching the Democrats in Congress when I was in there, that was my experience even then, right? It was always like very reactionary to just like whatever Trump's doing right now, not any sort of strategy, not any sort of forward thinking. And that has to change. Like we really need to be a little smarter.
Well, Nancy Pelosi, I think we need to talk about dear Nancy Pelosi. I is no longer the leader of the Democrats, but she was. I think she still was when you were serving as chief of staff. There's some weird stuff about Nancy Pelosi's politics. I mean, again, I was just reading the Ryan Grimm book, and they said people were kind of shocked that she was like talking about how abolish ICE was a slogan introduced by the Russians to divide us, and like the Green New Deal, which you've worked on, which should be like, okay, climate change is like the defining challenge of our generation. It's like the most serious, most urgent issue. There's a war here between the fossil fuel industry and those of us who want a livable future. Like you would think like having a very clear and good and comprehensive plan to deal with that massive, major, biggest problem would be the thing. And, Pelosi was like, she's the one who called it like the Green New Dream. We're like, pfft.
And there's the thing, like when I know I got this reputation as a fighter within Congress, but I was trying to be constructive.
We like that.
I was trying to be a constructive fighter. I really was trying to be productive here. We were trying to propose real ideas. It wasn't just like yelling at Pelosi for being Pelosi, And the thing about the Green New Deal, like it was a political strategy, right? If we just passed a resolution, that wouldn't have accomplished anything. It was really about inserting these ideas, talking about solving climate change as the same project as building up wealth and industry. It was this idea of we got to up the ambition, like way more than we had at the time. And one result of that was we did pressure. I mean, the original ask for the Green New Deal was actually to ask Nancy Pelosi to create a committee to make a 10-year plan, something she could have done. And she didn't quite do that, but she did make a committee that did some planning. And part of the result of that was when they did the Inflation Reduction Act, they had some real ideas to work off of. So we sort of pressured them into having to do some forward thinking. That paid off. But yes, I don't understand why her reaction was the way it was. She could have embraced it in any sort of way.
Hope you're enjoying this interview. If you want to listen to full-length current affairs interviews before they are made fully available to the public, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/currentaffairs and become a supporter today.